Hello everyone, RiceTime911 here, and today in this tutorial video, we're going to be looking at the material editing panel in Giant's Editor. What it is, what you can find there, what you can do with it, all that good stuff. We're going to go through the material editing panel here, and after this tutorial, hopefully you'll know everything you need to know about it and how to use it. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, to get started, how about first we look at some definitions. Alright, so if you open up the material editing panel in your Giant's Editor, let's say you didn't have it, what you just do is you go to Window, Material Editing, and then you can find it opened up right there. And there's two sections to the material editing panel. There's the material section and the custom shader section. For now, we'll just take a quick look at the material section. Okay, so first thing you'll see, material. So if you select something within the editor, on the scenograph or by clicking on it, whichever you prefer. For instance, I have this white corona selected now. Then what you will be able to do is you'll be able to see for that material, for that object, all the things that are connected to it. So in this case, the emissive texture for the corona. So that's just how it works. You select an object, and then you will be shown the material of that object and any textures applied to that object. And in this case, all we have for this corona is just an emissive texture. However, if you select something else, let's say you were to select a piece of the tractor. Let's say you selected, I don't know, okay, let's just say you selected the body of the tractor. Well, then you'd see material body, that's the material for the tractor, so the whole group of textures for it. And what you can find there, the body of the tractor has a diffuse texture, specular texture, normal texture, and all that good stuff. Okay, so now we know a little bit about how to go about selecting objects and how to see what you got. Now, let's just go through some definitions. Okay, so for starters, what's the diffuse texture? Basically, it's just like the base texture of the object. It has the colors and textures, whatever you want to have to your mod object that you have selected. It'll just have all the basic textures for that model that just give you the basic visuals, the colors and such. Now, what is a specular texture? Well, a specular texture really is, it can be two things. It can be for reflections, it can tell where something's more dull or more shiny, but also in Farming Simulator, it's also used for dirt maps. So certain areas will, for instance, have dirt, and as you can see, it's sort of weird colors. This green and bright yellow and all kinds of weird colors. Well, that's your specular texture. And perhaps in some future video, I'll show you how to make one of those. But if, for the time being, I might just link a tutorial for making one that really helped me. Okay, so moving on. That was your specular texture. It just basically helps you get the dirt. So if we were to say take off the specular texture, you wouldn't have the dirt anymore. Okay, so let's just put that specular texture back on there. Shared. Okay. Okay, so here I'll just put that back on real quickly. And as you see, when we reapply the specular texture, we'll have dirt again. And actually, one thing about the specular texture, it won't show dirt unless you put in a shader, but we'll go more into that a little later. Okay, so next up, we found out what diffuse texture is, specular. What's a normal texture? Okay, so let's just look really closely at the body here. You see how this here, the words Massey Ferguson 3A5 sort of look like they're popping out, like they got some depth to them. Well, basically, that's how a normal texture works. It helps give some texture, some body to your textures. So basically what a normal map will usually look like is something like this. It's bluish purple, and basically it just tells where in the model to have bumps and creases and that sort of thing that will help really make your texture pop. So that's what a normal texture is, and I believe if you go here and you add the bump depth, I believe that has to do with the normal texture, about how much that normal texture affects it. Now, let's look at emissive texture. Emissive texture is really mostly used for lights, so let's look at the lights. What emissive texture basically is that even in the dark, the texture won't look dark, so basically it's always glowing. So basically emissive is just a glow texture. So for instance, you'll see here, looks something like this, but any texture you can apply as a emissive texture, but just be cautious, because if it's not a light, then, well, you don't really need the body of your tractor to glow, so you don't need an emissive texture on everything. Okay, so cube map. What's a cube map? Okay, so a cube map is basically just for reflections. It will give some reflection to your model or object. So when you put in a cube map, usually it'll look something like this. Perhaps you have one, perhaps not, but you can get cube maps from certain places, and if you want one, then I'll put a link in the description for cube maps. But basically, this is what a cube map does. It adds shininess to the surface of your object. Okay, perhaps not in that bright light, but, well, it would in game, but here's what it does. It basically just adds, if you can see, there's some various shininess to it. Glossy. It's just basically for reflections, basically for chrome bits or that kind of thing. And one thing to know about cube maps, though, is that they tend to cause lag to your game. So really, it'll drop your FPS count, your frames per second. It'll really have an impact on that. So it's best to keep your models free of cube map, or your mods rather, if you can. But you can add cube map if you want, if it's not affecting yours, and you can do what you want. But personally, I don't like to use cube maps because they tend to affect performance quite a bit, and for most computers it's not that nice. But anyway, that's a cube map. So next up, how about we have a look at Windows a little bit. Okay, so now here's the interesting thing about Windows. Windows actually can have specular and normal textures to give them depth and dirt or reflectivity. They can also have cube maps for reflections on the glass, but your diffuse texture for Windows will be transparent, so see-through, of course. And one thing to note is this alpha blending box here. That's something to keep in mind when you're doing Windows, because Windows actually, alpha blending has to do with transparency, so it'll help your Windows to be transparent and to work better in that way. And that's another thing. If you want a cube map to your Windows, you can do that as well, and it will add some reflections to your window. So if that's something you want to do, you can do that as well, or you can add normal texture to them if you want, or even a specular. Alright, so next up, I think we'll take a bit of a look at the shaders. Okay, now a quick note here, just in case you weren't familiar with this. Here, way this works. When you select an object, if you want to change or add a texture to any of these areas, you just click the three dots that allow you to choose a texture. A little box will come up, then you can press the three dots again. That'll let you go and pick a texture. So for instance, for your diffuse or specular, whichever texture, and then you just select a texture and it'll appear there. You close this and it'll be applied. And if you want to remove a texture, just click the little X. That'll remove a certain texture. you want at, just press the 3 dots, and then go find your texture, put it in, there you go. So yeah, that's the basics of operating these and adding a texture, removing one. And the same applies to shaders. You can click this to remove, this to replace or add. Now the thing is, there's quite a few shaders, but we'll just look at about 2 of them for this video. Vehicle Shader and Emissive Lights Shader are the shaders we're going to look at. Usually if you look at a sample mod or someone else's mod for Farming Simulator, they'll have these shaders included in their mod, and usually at the bare minimum, Vehicle Shader. Okay, so let's just take a look at Vehicle Shader. What's it do? Okay, so as you can see here, we have the Vehicle Shader put on the body of the tractor. So let's put a light on that. Now, what's this shader do? Well, basically, there's a whole bunch of different sorts of variations you can apply. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure what they all do. But color mask would be used if you have a white texture to your vehicle. So basically, if you have a white diffuse texture to your vehicle, the white parts will be colorable, black parts won't be colorable. It works something like that, and you just put the shader type to color mask, and then with a little bit of coding in the XMLs there, you can get colorable in the game. Now, you can also choose, I'll just go through the ones here I'm familiar with. Color mask, that's good for, yeah, changing color. Rim color mask, usually you'd use that if you were making colorable rims. And dual, not sure what the difference is here, but there's quite a few different options you can choose. And of course, window, there's 2. That'll add transparency, and it looks like what it does is it takes into account the spec map, and yeah, that actually turned out pretty interesting. But either way, window, you'd put that onto a window you could use, shader type window, and UV rotate, not sure what that does. There's a whole bunch of different ones here. You can just experiment with it and see what you like and what you don't. And yeah, tire pressure deformation, I think you can use that with tires somehow, but I'm not exactly sure at the moment. Okay, so now let's just take a quick look here at the variations and shader, Emissive Light Shader for Coronas here. Okay, so here we have our Corona. It's a white Corona. I believe I did go into this more in depth in one of my other videos, which I'll link in the description. I believe it was on lights, Coronas possibly. But basically, you just apply the shader, which is Emissive Light Shader. You just go in, click the little page there, and that'll allow you to choose where you want the shader to come from. And this is open shader source. Okay, but either way, this is how you add a shader. You just click this little page here, and then the shader, and then you can import it, and then you can choose all different types of shaders. And yeah, actually, I'll just link the other video on Coronas, and you can take a look at what all these different variations do from there. So yeah, that's just a basic walk through the material editing panel. Hopefully you're more familiar with it now. And hopefully this tutorial has helped you to get over any fears you have with it and to be more comfortable using it. And hopefully now you know the basics, what a diffuse texture is, specular, normal, emissive, cube map, what all these things do, how they work. And if this tutorial did help you, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching, I'll see y'all later. Have a good one.